Who is Jesus? It's not a trick question. It's the central question that the church has tried to answer for over 2,000 years. And in John's gospel alone, there's 7 I am statements that we can find, statements that Jesus says about himself to help us understand who he is. Jesus says, I am the true vine, I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, I am the gate, I am the good shepherd, I am the resurrection and the life, and I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I suppose that Jesus' words spoken to Thomas make even less intuitive sense to us than they would have made to him. After all, Thomas knew Jesus personally. They had lived together for 3 years, and Thomas had studied under Jesus' leadership and seen him work miracles. I don't think any of us today could really grasp what it would be like to be so close to God in Jesus. We too would probably be in denial about the person standing right in front of us. If we don't take Jesus' words to be an expression of his intimate relationship with the Father and the Holy Spirit, which Christians describe as the Trinity, these words would certainly have to be spoken by a megalomaniac. The way, the truth, and the life? In the mouth of a different person, these words would be a weapon. And the heartbreaking truth is that Jesus' parting words to the disciples have been forged as a weapon to divide and control people throughout the history of the church and even today. Just a few days ago, an Episcopal colleague of mine on Twitter expressed embarrassment that her first response to seeing the hashtag Jesus Christ is Lord was trending on Twitter, her first response was to feel afraid. And this is a minister. Even we as Christians can experience church hurt. We may feel neglected or overlooked, even alienated from God because of the church's actions. The way, the truth, and the life falls on deaf ears when the speakers of these words stand in the way, silence the truth, and destroy life. This past week alone, we learned of the death of Ahmaud Arbery, another unarmed black man who was killed while going out for a jog. He was my age. 2 trans women were also killed this week, Nina Pop and Helly J. O'Regan. And we know that over 1,000 incidents of discrimination against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have been reported. How many more have not been reported? What does the church have to say about this? Are we standing in the way, silencing truth and destroying life? Or are we looking to Jesus for something else? For a different way. Times like these can make us feel isolated and lost. And I think the disciples were probably also feeling isolated and lost when Jesus told them this, that they know the way. And these words, this passage that we read this morning comes from something that scholars call the farewell discourses of Jesus. In John's Gospel, chapters 14 through 17 are the words that Jesus speaks to his disciples after the Last Supper and before he's tried and executed by the Roman government. Only moments before Jesus says these words of encouragement, he had identified the disciple who would betray him and even claimed that Peter would deny him 3 times. Thomas asks the question, how will we know the way when we don't even know where you're going? It's a reasonable question, and it's one that many people share today. We wish we knew more about what God has in store for our futures. We are looking for clarity and hoping for a path forward when the light at the end of the tunnel couldn't be more dim. As I stated in my sermon a few weeks ago, Thomas is expressing his faith by trying to ask questions and understand more deeply. Now, in our English translation of the scripture, which I read this morning, both Thomas and Jesus used the same word, know. And Thomas asks, how can we know the way? And Jesus tells Thomas that the way to God is through him. If you know Jesus, you know his Father. But in Greek, the original language that the Gospel of John was written in, these words that Thomas and Jesus use are different. In Greek, there are two words, eido and gnosko. So this is your language lesson for the day. Now, eido, the first word for know, it communicates a kind of knowledge that is complete. Knowledge like facts. We can know static information, your perception of the world around you based on concrete information. But gnosko is intimate knowledge. It's more relational, and it's something that's gradually learned by experience. It can't be perceived all at once. So I like to think of this as the difference between knowing about God and knowing God. Now, knowing about God can give us a sense of superiority over others. It allows us to have binary thinking, black and white thinking, and it sets us up as all-knowing and puts us in control. But throughout the Bible and throughout our lives, we learn that there is always more to know about God. Our knowledge of God is often challenged, and sometimes even changed. And certainly this would have been true for the disciples. Faith is often described as a journey, and the scriptures invite us to walk humbly with God. This is gnosko knowledge that Jesus refers to when he addresses his disciples. You know the way to the Father. Think about it this way. I have an illustration for you. This will be fun. Because why should the kids be the only ones who get an illustration? I have this delicious tiramisu cake. Can you see it?
Yes.
And I wanted to share it with you. I thought, yeah, it's a great piece of cake. It can't be enjoyed just by one person, so I'll share it with all of my friends. It tastes delicious. It's rich and sweet and silky. It's got that nice coffee flavor. It smells amazing, let me tell you. Oh my goodness. I cannot wait to try this, and I know you can't wait to try it too. Now, okay, I'll put this down. Now, I know when I described the cake, you couldn't taste it. Maybe that's a bit mean. But you can't taste it because it's here and you're somewhere else. Now, I could take a fork and have a bite of this and really bother you, but I'll be nice. But for those of you who have had cake before, you probably were able to imagine the taste, right? There's something in our brains that when we think of an experience that we've had before, we can imagine tastes or smells or sights. In the description of this cake, maybe made you remember other delicious desserts that you've had in the past. But if you've never had cake, these words probably wouldn't have any particular meaning for you. So, okay, it's not a perfect metaphor, but I think our lives of faith can be like this. When we gather together as a worshiping community, we try our best to name and remember together what it means to be in communion with God. So even when God feels far away, the familiar words may give us a memory of the sweet taste of divine. See what I did there? And if you haven't tasted God's presence before, it is our prayer that we as leaders in the church and as members of the church can do a good enough job describing God that you will be able to recognize God's presence when you do. And the Apostle Paul says it this way: "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am known." We know that God is beyond our understanding and our explanation, but we owe it to one another and to ourselves to make our best and most earnest attempt to witness to God in this hurting world. In the church, we profess to gnosko know the God of all creation, the God of heaven and earth, as truly present in Jesus Christ and truly present to us by the power of the Holy Spirit. We know God and are known by God in a way that is still being revealed to us. And on some days, we taste this truth as sweetly as tiramisu cake. The words, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," were spoken to believers like us as a sign of assurance and peace in a season of hardship. They were not spoken as an attempt to convince or to condemn. They were a reminder to a people who felt lost that they really did already know the way. Draw near to God, and God will draw near to you. After Jesus tells his disciples that he is the way, the truth, and the life, he tells them that they will do things beyond their imagination. Just as God is beyond our imaginations, God works in us beyond our imaginations. And by working in us, God makes us the church, living stones, able to grow and move and change, laid on a strong foundation and built up together to become the people of God. So friends, hear the words of Jesus Christ to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. From now on, you do know God, and you have seen God. And you know the way to the place where I am going. Thanks be to God.